Well, let's take a closer look at these hearings with Jonathan Katz. Now, he's a senior fellow with the German Marshall Fund, and he joins me now from the US Capitol. Well, good evening to you. Thanks so much for joining us on the programme. Well, let's just take a look at the events at the impeachment hearing today. The Republicans had wanted these two witnesses, Kurt Volker and Tim Morrison, to stand. But how far has the testimony we heard helped their cause?
Yeah, I think what happened today with these four witnesses was reconfirming, I think, what we know about the situation, which is the president bribed a foreign power to achieve political objectives. And I think what you saw today was really the case being built by the Democrats in Congress as to what took place. And I think you heard it directly from Mr. Vindman, who's a war hero, that the president, what he overheard was not acceptable and out of great concern. And so I think what happened today just builds on what's already been said by previous U.S. officials or former U.S. officials. And we'll see more tomorrow with Ambassador Sondland, who really is at the center of this really terrible situation, which has put U.S. national security
So what
at
do you
jeopardy.
think, how much of an impact do you think the testimony of Mr. Sondland could have? Because, as you say, he is key to this whole process.
He was at the president's side conducting these actions. We already know that he may have perjured himself in front of Congress. Tomorrow he's going to have a very difficult time with all of the previous witnesses having really come out with the conclusion that the president acted in a manner that he should not have. Now you have Mr. Sondland, who is a political supporter of President Trump, out front and having to address these same issues. It's very likely that we'll see Mr. Sondland quite possibly take the fifth or decide not to answer certain questions. So he is a very different type of witness than what we've seen. But we already know from transcripts and from the testimony of these other U.S. officials that Mr. Sondland is at the center of this issue.
OK, so he's at the centre of this issue. But so far what we've seen is both sides really very much remaining entrenched behind party lines. Do you think there's anything that could be heard at this testimony that might swing either side in this impeachment inquiry?
Well, again, we're in day three of this process. There'll be more witnesses coming forward. Of course, there are partisan lines that have been drawn. But one thing I do know, and we've seen it a few times now, where Republicans have rejected the notion of attacks by the president or by the president's cronies on U.S. officials like Masha Yovanovitch or Mr. Vindman. Mr. Vindman, again, is a war hero, somebody who shouldn't be questioned. And the types of attacks that we're seeing, I think, for many Republicans as well as Democrats, are unacceptable. And so the Republicans themselves are creating problems for themselves politically with others. But in this case, they have to be really careful about crossing these lines.
OK, so Republicans having to be careful about crossing lines. Well, Jonathan Katz from the German Marshall Fund, thanks so much for joining us on the programme.